Imagine you have a straight on image like this, but you want to manipulate the perspective. Maybe you want to take it and maybe you want to make it look like it's fitting in a photo frame like this, where the photo frame is obviously angled away from the camera. What about something like this playing card where it's tilted away? Could we use Canva to manipulate perspective like this? And if we can't, if it's not a good option, then what options do we have? Well, don't worry, because I got you covered in this video. I'm going to show you how I would handle this problem, and I'll get you doing this sort of photo manipulation in no time. So what options do we have inside of Canva for manipulating perspective? Well, under the Apps tab, you have this Mockup app, and under this Mockup app, you can see all kinds of different mockups. So you have things from apparel to sort of frames that represent your phone, your computer screen. So I could choose this smartphone right here. I could choose this mockup. I could take this image. I could apply it on there. And yes, it is manipulating this image. Then I could come in here and adjust some of these options. I could fill it to the screen. I could apply those changes. So mockups do allow you to sometimes come in here and change the perspective. The problem is you're just changing it to whatever apparel or product shot you chose from this ready-made apps library. It's not really giving me the option to take control and map it to my own image. And so if you have something like this and you want to put it on here, I need to be able to take total control myself of changing that perspective. So mockups, sure, the mockup app is great if you want to make use of the particular mockup that they have in their library, but not a good solution when you have your own object, your own plane that you're trying to map your picture to. That's when you need custom transform controls, so that's just not going to work. Okay, so what other options do we have for manipulating perspective here in Canva? Well, there actually is a second app here. So if I come under the Apps tab again, you also have what's called Skew Image. So if I start to type in Skew, I can find this Skew Image app. And if I come under this app right here, so let me do Skew Image. Let me choose a file. So let me go ahead and find that file right here. I'll go ahead and open it again. You can also, if you have one on screen, it'll make use of the one you have on screen. So you can either upload or use an image on your screen. And then once you do that and you open the Skew Image app, then you can come in here and you can actually manipulate the perspective this way. So this is a step in the right direction, because now we do have some horizontal skew and some vertical skew that we can apply. So we are making perspective sort of distortion adjustments. But the problem is, you notice that all these corners are moving at once when I make a change. It's not really enough custom control. In other words, I'm not going to be able to use this tool and map something precisely to the area I want to manipulate it to. So this is a transform tool, but not one with nearly enough control. So I don't think this Skew Image tool is especially useful. It's not going to work great for me to map something, for example, to say this image here, because I just can't really get this to represent the right perspective. In other words, you'll notice that the length of this side and the length of this side are really staying the same no matter what I do here. But really, this one is longer than this one here, because you have that foreshortening when something is tilting away from the camera, tilted away from the camera. So this Skew Image tool, not really going to get the job done. Another app I've heard people talk about is this Transform Image app, but I think this has a lot of the same shortcomings that that Skew Image app has. So you can choose a file, and so I'll choose this file once again. But my issue, once again, you have to work in this small preview window. You can't see the actual image over here in real time as you make adjustments. And you come in here and you basically click right on here. You can zoom in and out here, and then you sort of make the adjustments just by clicking and moving here. But again, you'll notice all the different corners are moving at once. Again, it just does not have that finite control. So you can come in here and you can make lots of adjustments. I think it is a little bit better than that Skew Image app, but again, it just does not give you that finite control. I'm trying to click on just a corner point. You can't really do it. So it does a lot of transformations in here, but it's really tough to control, and you need to have that control. This doesn't really give you that finite control. You'd be going back and forth forever, I think, if you're trying to sort of get something to match something specific in a scene here, which to me, that's a real life application. You're going to be trying to match it with your scene. So just playing around like here with something like this, again, you can get something cool, but I don't think it's the best solution. There has to be another way. Well, what about creating a custom frame for Canva? If you've watched this channel before, you know I have a custom frame tutorial, which lets you pretty much turn any shape, anything you want, into a custom frame, which you can then drop an image into. The problem with custom frames is it is not going to manipulate the perspective of an existing image like this. In other words, I can drop this in, but it's not going to suddenly shorten one side the way this side up here at the top of the playing card is shorter than this side because of the perspective. It's not going to do that. It's not going to make that perspective adjustment. So I can take this image, I can drag it in, I can come in here, I can rotate it, make this rotation, but it's not going to look quite right. So in other words, here's the adjustment we made, but what it should really look like is this, so it's not really flattening and changing that perspective the way it should be doing. Now you could come in here and once again, let me just take this out of here. So let me just detach this image. You could try some combination of these two techniques. In other words, this skew image we talked about. So I could come in here and use this to change the perspective a little bit. So let's just fool around. And again, it's not giving me a live preview over here. All I can do is see a preview over here. That's another thing about this skew image tool that makes it difficult to use, because you can't really see it in your design until you actually add it to your design here. And then you have to come back over here if you want to make adjustments. So it's not that user friendly, but I could skew the image first and then put it in the frame. And that might lead to a little bit better result. But again, not just quite getting the job done. So what is the tool we're going to need to be able to get a better result? How are we going to get this done? Okay, so this is Photopea. Photopea is a free online editor, and it's made to mimic Photoshop. So if you've watched this channel before, you know I've been using Photoshop for a couple decades. I love it. It's a great tool. But for anybody that's looking for a free version where they can get started, they can fill in some of the gaps, things that Canva is not good at, this is the tool I recommend, because Photopea has some additional controls, some additional options, things you simply cannot do in Canva, and it really does let you fill in some of those gaps for things that if you try to do them in Canva, you're just going to be spending a lot of extra time and not necessarily getting an ideal result. So this is how we're going to solve this problem of being able to transform images, because Photopea has transform controls that you just do not have in Canva. And again, it mimics Photoshop. So if you're comfortable with Photoshop, absolutely you can use Photoshop. But I'm going to teach Photopea here today, since this is something anybody can access for free. You don't even have to set up an account. You can just come here and get started. Now they do have a pro version of account that has a few extra options, but for the most part, all of the tools are available here in this free version, and definitely everything you're going to need to do to just fill in some gaps. And we're going to use that today to solve this problem of transforming an image onto a different plane, into a different perspective. Okay, let's just work through a few examples using photos we had open earlier in Canva. And I've saved those off as JPEG, so I'm just going to open them up here inside of Photopea. So I'll choose this open from my computer. You can navigate to where you have the photos you want to work with. And then so I will go ahead and open up this cube image, this gallery image, this poker image. And I'm just going to open up another picture here that I can use to paste into these scenes. So I'll open up this as well. Again, when you open up multiple images like this, you may have to hold down the control key to select multiple items, but then we'll go ahead and open, and they should each open as a separate file here. Now this is the image I'm going to paste into the other scenes, so I will go ahead and come in here and actually just hit Control A to select everything, so you can see the dotted line now. Now that's Control A on Windows. You could hit Command A if you're on Mac, since you have that Command key instead, and then Control C to copy, again Command C on Mac, and then I'll come over to this gallery image, and I'm going to hit Control V, and it should come in now on another layer. Okay, so the first step in this process is you usually want to see and figure out roughly the width and height ratio of the surface where you're going to be placing your image. Now, if I look at these paintings here, even though they're oriented differently, I would say based on this one that I'm looking close to straight on, that is maybe 3 units wide for every 2 units tall. You don't have to get this ratio exactly right, but you want to at least be in the ballpark, because if you're way off on your ratio, then when you distort it, you're going to be distorting pixels that you don't mean to distort, and it's just not going to look right. So I think it's roughly 2 to 3. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come and I'm going to start to size down this image here. So what we're going to be doing to size down an image is we're going to come up under this move tool, this sort of arrow we see at the top, and you can see if you hover over it, it says move tool. We're going to click on that. We're going to make sure that this transform controls is on, and when it is, we should see this blue bounding box. Now we can click a corner and we can start to resize. Now as you do that, you might be able to change the perspective like this, but if you hold down the shift key, it's going to basically lock the proportions. So now we're keeping the width and height, locked into what they are. So I'm going to make it maybe roughly like this. And now I mentioned before that it looks like this is maybe something like 3 to 2 in terms of height to width. This one is maybe a little wider, but it's close enough that I think it's going to work. I could always crop or trim this image down, and if I, for example, had a square frame, I would want to crop this down to a square, but since this is close enough, I think it's going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to size it down, and then we're going to change the transparency here so we can see through to the surface where we want to place that image, and we're going to make it so it's at least as big as the area we're going to be warping it to. So again, as you resize with these corner points, you can hold down the shift key, you can click in the center, you can drag it around. And so I'm roughly preparing it to go into this frame here, and I'm keeping the transparency so I can see, zooming in as I need to. Now the key to skewing the image, to changing the perspective, is going to be the free transform tools that you have in here. There are actually multiple ways you can get to it. Let me just show you a couple, and then I'll show you my preferred method. So with your image selected here, you can use Control-Alt-T on your keyboard, which is the keyboard shortcut for free transform. And so if I go under the edit menu, I also can find that here, free transform. And then if I were to choose that, then I could right click and I would want to choose this distort options. These different options are all going to do different things, but when you choose distort, then when you click on a corner point, you can move just that one corner point at a time. But let me hit Control Z, because the easiest way to do this isn't even going through those menus. It's just to come up here, come to the move tool, make sure you have transform controls on, otherwise you're not going to see those corner points. So you want to make sure you have that turned on. And then once that's turned on, all you have to do is hold down the control key. Now that's control on Windows. On Mac, that would be the command key. But when you hold that down, it's going to let you move points individually. So if I grab this corner point without holding down the control key, you'll notice that the opposite point is also moving, depending on which way I slide, this way or this way. So I'm going to hit Control Z because I don't want that. But then if I hold down the control key, then I am just moving this one point. So I can hold down the control key, command key if you're on Mac, and then we can take that point and we're just going to move it right to the corner of this. In other words, the surface area bounds where we want it to be placed. And so then I'm going to do that with each of the 4 points. So again, holding down the control key. This whole time I'm just keeping my finger on the control key because you don't want to commit these changes yet. You want to do all these points at once. So I just have my finger on the control key. I'm individually grabbing these points. I'm moving them to the edge area where I need that corner point to be. And again, you see as we do this, we're changing the perspective here. Now, occasionally something will go wonky and it accidentally snapped those other ones. I'm not sure why it did that. I've just noticed that quirk here inside of Photopea. So if that happens, you may just have to go ahead and redo the points that repositioned. Again, I'm not sure why that's happening. Some sort of snapping to something, but we're just going to redo those points that slid. And again, this whole time I haven't committed these changes. I'm just holding down my control key. I'm getting these in the position I want. And then when it looks good, that's when you're going to come out. That's when you're going to hit the enter key and you're going to commit those changes. So now if I drag this transparency back up and we click out of this for a second, it looks like now we have this picture on the wall and we've matched the perspective of the scene, which is the key to sell this trick. Again, if this woman was looking face on to us, like she was looking at the camera, that's not matching the perspective of the scene. So you have to use this sort of free transform. And this is not a tool you'll find in Canva, but it is something you're going to find here in Photopea. And also, if you're a Photoshop user, you can find it in Photoshop. Now, something for you to be aware of. When you're doing a free transform like this, once you hit that enter key, it commits the change and then it redraws the bounding box. So if I come to this layer 1, which is the picture that we just warped here, and I click on that, and then we go into our move tool so we can see our transform controls, we'll notice that this corner point is still exactly in the corner of the actual pixels. Same down here. But then if we look at these two here, now since it's redrawn a perfect rectangle here, these no longer match up, right? Because we just have horizontal and vertical lines here when we have a bounding box with inside of Photopea or Photoshop. We do not have ones that are at angles the way this picture is now at an angle. And so the issue with that is if we now try to do the same thing where we hold down our control key and we're moving something around, yes, we can move this corner, but you'll notice how this corner shifts too because it's not at the actual anchor point. So yes, we can still come in here, we can still move things around, but it is more difficult now because we don't have those precise corners. Okay, so it's something to be aware of. You usually want to start with an image that's face on, where each corner is exactly going to be the corner point of the transform controls, and then you want to do each corner all at once, then hit enter once you're finally done with the transform, because if you try to do it a second time, then you'll notice that the new bounding box is going to make it more difficult to do this sort of resizing. Okay, so just something to be aware of. Okay, let's work the second example now. So I'm going to copy this same image again. We're just going to use the same image for this second example. We're going to come over here and again Control V to paste it in the scene. I'm going to hold down my Shift key to constrain the proportions as I size it down, because we can use a much smaller image now. Now, once again, pay attention to sort of the width-height ratio. Suddenly we have something that is taller than it is wider if we're looking at this area where this king is, and that is certainly not the case with our photo here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here, grab this rectangular marquee. We'll use it on free because again, you don't have to get this perfect, you just want to eyeball it and get it pretty close. So I'm going to go drag something roughly like this. Again, this might not be perfect, but it's close enough. I'm going to release it to make the selection, and then if you have a selection like this and you want to just copy what pixels from that up to a new layer, you can use a keyboard shortcut called Control J. This would be the same as hitting Control C, new layer, and then going to that new layer and Control V to paste, but instead I'm just going to use Control J on my keyboard. You'll see that it automatically just cut out those pixels I had selected and put it up on another layer. So just a little keyboard shortcut that saves time. And now I can scale this one, warp this one to this area. So again, comes these free transform controls. We're going to move it over here. I'm going to get so I can see through a little bit to my playing card, and then remember you also may want to zoom in. So I'm going to zoom in here just so I can see better. Zoom in so we can basically see the corners exactly where you want to place this. Go back to the transform. Remember, you're going to hold down that Control key if you're a Windows user, Command key if you're a Mac user, and then we'll do this point by point. So we'll drag this one exactly to that corner. We'll drag this one exactly to this corner. We'll grab this one up here. We'll drag it exactly to that corner. We'll drag this one here exactly to this corner. The whole time I've been holding down the Control key, and now that we have all 4 points done, now is when I can hit enter to commit the changes. And then just like that, we've transformed this image to the surface of this playing card. And again, just not something you can do in Canva, but with the free transform abilities in Photopea and Photoshop, you can do it very easily. And yes, I know when you move over to new software, it can be uncomfortable like this, but when you're working in Canva and you open up one of those apps, you're really working with something you're unfamiliar with anyways. And so why bungle around in there with something that's not even going to get the job done very well, where if you spend a little time, if you're willing to embrace the discomfort of a new interface like Photopea and just play around, be comfortable being uncomfortable, you can learn these tools, and then suddenly new worlds of possibility will open up to you. And of course, on this channel, subscribe, sign up for my newsletter. I will help you along the way as much as I can. Okay, so let's work the last example, and then I have one more crucial thing to show you that can really save you a ton of time. So first I'm going to come under this cube option here, but this time instead of just copying and pasting that image, I'm going to go into the file menu, and there is this option called open in place. So we're going to choose open in place. This time I'll select this image here since it's roughly already a square, and we know we're using that cube that has square faces. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. So now I don't have to worry about cropping this because it's already roughly the size we need. But I want you to make note of this little symbol here. That is a symbol for a smart object, which is another tool you have in Photopea and Photoshop, and it can be your secret weapon. Now, I'm not going to make this a full tutorial about this, but I'm going to show you how it can be really useful. So we will come back to this in a second, but first let's just work our steps here. So we're going to lower the transparency so we can see through to the surface where we want to put it. Let's just say we want to put it on the right side here. So then I'll go into my transform controls, and we will go ahead and copy, size this down so it's roughly close to the area we're going to use, a little bit bigger, so something like that. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to copy this. I'm going to hit Control J just to make a copy of this, just because maybe I'll put it on this other side too. So maybe I'll end up putting one on the other side of the cube here, but let's just start with this side first. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom in. So let's zoom in a fair bit, something like that maybe I think I can just see my corner points. We'll see. And then I want to make sure I'm on the right image here. So this one right here. And then I'm going to go back to my move tool here. Again, hold down that control key and roughly drag to my corner points. I may not get this perfect, but I'm going to make sure that I at least go to the bounds. So if I'm missing here, I'm going to miss slightly on the wide side so that it's maybe a little bit bigger than the area. Again, grab this one here, drag it in. Again, if I miss, I'm going to miss a little bit wider than the whole surface area, and I'll show you why in a minute. And again, like this, if I miss, I'm going to miss a little wide, but I'll go ahead and hit enter because I basically have it the way I want. Okay, so before we look at that, let's go over and do this other one. So I'm going to slide over here to this one here, and this is this image up here. So again, we'll come up to this one now. Make sure we have these controls here. So make sure we have that selected. Again, control key here, drag this point over. Again, if I miss, I'm going to miss slightly bigger than the surface, but I'm going to get it close enough that we're not going to see any squashing or distorting of pixels beyond what we want to do in terms of matching to the scene here. So we'll do that one here, and then finally we'll grab this one on the bottom here and we'll drag it roughly up to this corner. Again, since I haven't committed anything yet, I can still come up here and adjust a corner if I see one I want to make an adjustment to. So maybe something like that. And again, play around my transparency. And okay, it's all looking pretty good. We'll go ahead and hit the enter key. Now, the reason why I said you might want to go slightly beyond the edge sometimes is simply because you can continue to take advantage of the other tools you have here inside of Photopea. And in Photopea and Photoshop, you have masking, again, something you cannot do in Canva. So this is where Photopea is also a nice tool to fill in the gaps and to pair with Canva because you have these extra features. And so with masking, basically, you can create a mask on a layer. So I could create a mask on this layer here, and it's just represented now by white. But you can fill it with black to hide pixels or gray to partially hide pixels. So let's imagine here that we were putting this on a flat surface so we match the perspective, but then maybe we have a rounded edge here, which we do to a small degree, but even if it was bigger now, I could come and I could hide the portion of the image here that I don't want to show, the portion that went beyond the surface I was trying to sort of place it on, by just coming in here and adding some black on this mask. So what I would do is just use another tool, like maybe my pen tool here. So let me just grab this pen tool right here, and then we'll come in here and we'll click on the image with our pen tool, and then we'll come up here, and where it's curved up here, I could just start to add in a little bit of a curve. Now I know I did a really bad job with that, but we're not going to worry about that because I'm not trying to get exactly right. I'm just illustrating this so I could do that. And now when I have that selected, I could come in here, edit, fill. We're going to make sure we fill with our background color, which is black, or choose black right here. So I'll choose black on this menu. And we'll go ahead and click OK, and we can see that now when I did that, that portion got hidden. Now obviously that doesn't look good, but I'm just illustrating here how you have more tools inside of Photopea and Photoshop you can take advantage of. You can start to pair with Canva. Now, talking about more features, let's come back to this little icon here. What does this icon mean? Well, this means that this item is a smart object. And what a smart object means is that it means that this file, this photo that we're seeing, that this smart object is part of, it exists as its own file. So let me turn on and off to see which side we're working with. So we're working with this one here. What if I wanted a different image on this side of the cube? If I was going to do this as a regular part of my workflow, or maybe I was showing an image at a perspective and I knew I was going to reuse it in the future, I would definitely want to use a smart object because you can prevent yourself from having to do the transform work again and again. Let me just show you what I mean. Remember, we placed this object in here. So when it was a forward-facing object, it was in here as a smart object. That means that all those transformed I applied them to the smart object. So if I actually double-click on the layer here that has this smart object, I can actually double-click and open the original file here. Okay, so what if I come in here and I'm going to open a new image? So I'm going to go File, Open, and let me grab this image now. Okay, open. We're going to grab this gentleman here. Control A, Control C to copy. Now we're in the smart object file. I'm going to hit Control V, and now I'm going to take him and I'm going to size him up so that he fits everything here. So let's come in here and we'll drag this up, and then I'm just going to shift click to drag. Now normally you wouldn't maybe scale something up like this, but it's not going to matter too much in this example. We're just doing this for example purposes. Again, get this position where I want, so let me just move him here into the center of the screen. I'll click enter, and now that I've done that, let me just go back to this cube for a second. We see it looks the same, but let me come back here. What happens when I save this now? So I'm going into my file menu, I'm clicking save, and we're saving this smart object, okay? So I've saved this smart object. What happens now when I come back to the cube? Let's come back and look at that. They are both making use of this same smart object file, so they have both updated. Of course, if we used a different smart object on this side, then we'd be able to update this side independently, and you'll notice that each of these sides have the transform applied. So when you use a smart object like this, you can then do transform and other edits where you're not directly doing it on the original file. It's just being applied as a layer over top of the smart object. And this becomes a powerful tool because when you're doing a repetitive task like you might be doing with this, if it's something you want to do again, transform something to the same dimensions, then you don't necessarily have to go back and do all the transform steps, because you can just adjust that original smart object file. So again, if I wanted to double click into here, and then I could come in here and say file, open in place, and let's grab this particular one here. So let's just grab something totally different. Let's grab this one here. So I'm going to take this file here, bring it in, give it a chance to open up, and then again we'd scale it up. So let's scale it way up. We got some extra stuff in this image that we don't want, so we'd scale it beyond the bounds. Again, hold down my shift key just so I'm not distorting it so much. Go ahead and hit enter to commit the change, and then go ahead and save it. Again, file, save. We'll go ahead and save smart object, and then jump back to that cube after I do that save, and then boom, just like that, we've updated the images. Okay, so this is the power of using another tool that gives you some of these extra features. And so this is how you do transforms using this tool in the free transform option, and distorting by just using the control command key, dragging those corners, getting them where you want. And then remember this smart object feature. Now, let me just walk you back to one of my other examples here with this one here. Remember, we just copied and pasted this image over, so this is not a smart object. It does not have the smart object icon. However, you can turn anything into a smart object just by right-clicking on that layer, choose the Convert to Smart Object option, okay? But you would want to do that before you do the transform. If I do this now, I'm just essentially saving an image that's already distorted, so I want to first convert it to a smart object, then do the transform. Then I could go into that smart object, make adjustments, and change what appeared on this card without having to do the transform again. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you learned something. If you have questions, just put them in the comments below. Going forward, if you're working on a design and you need to transform pixels like this, I hope you now know you do have some options in Canva, but to find an option that really gives you finite control, yes, you may have to step out of it and be brave. Use something like Photopea or Photoshop. It's going to do a much better job. And if you like tutorials like this about Canva and how to extend Canva in smart ways, then feel free to subscribe to this channel. I also have a free Canva newsletter, and I give away a lot of freebies to my subscribers. So if you're interested in that newsletter and staying up with all the latest about Canva and grabbing some of those freebies, I will provide a link to that right below in the first pinned comment. So go ahead and check that out, and I hope to see you soon.